Welcome, everyone. This is the RSE panel, the Research Software Engineers. RSEs are really interesting and slightly different than CURIOSS, as you all know, has to do with OSPOs in an academic setting, which means everything else, including RSEs, but also students and like, which are not. I'm not talking way too much, which is fine. So I'll be the moderator for this panel, and here are the three people who will be talking the majority of the time. If you don't mind, could you share a bit about your institution and where you sit in your institution? And your name, Aedín.
Hi. My name is Aedín Culhane. I am a professor at the University of Limerick, and I work in cancer genomics, which isn't the area that you might traditionally think of as being maybe a software side of things. But I do something called computational biology or computational oncology, because it's specifically how we apply computer science and maths to understand genetic data and genomics data in cancer.
Thank you very much.
And I've been involved in Bioconductor for over 20 years, which is one of the probably largest and arguably one of the more successful open source research projects in the world, in that we have been running for over 25 years. We have over 2,500 developers and 1 million downloads, unique IPs. And globally, we run conferences on 3 continents annually. And in a study done by CCI of the most impactful and most cited software mentions in the entire of the published literature in science, 4 of the top 10 softwares were in Bioconductor. And so I'm on the governance board of it. So.
Thank you very much.
That's why the software
really good context. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Angela, tell us all about how UT Austin is exactly the same and just as influential.
We're not even that close. So University of Texas at Austin, prior to like a month ago, I sat in the Chief Information Office and ran an innovation office, and the OSPO was part of that, in anticipation that we will build out a University of Texas system OSPO inspired by California. I have moved my office up to Texas Advanced Computing Center because the UT system funds an office there called the Research Cyber Infrastructure Office, and the OSPO for the system will sit in that office. So that was a complicated answer to that question, but I know that if I say Chief Information Officer or tech, like people have known me here in both contexts. TAC, well, if we want to add prestige, TAC is the NSF AI Foundation AI Center for the entire research infrastructure in the United States. We're building out a gigantic data center that is focused on AI research. The OSPO will inform, or we will have OSPO practices that inform the work that goes on there. And as such, we are going to be engaging research software engineers. I think that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I had to really put that puzzle together. That was a really hard question for me.
It's okay. David Pérez-Suárez, you and I were last at the UK RSE main conference. You're also one of the main RSE people involved with SunPy originally, which is a major astrodynamic, astrophysical astronomy, I think is the word I'm looking for, astronomy package. Can you tell us more about what you do as the lead of the OSPO at UCL and how that involves research software engineers? I'm trying to make it easy because Angela said it was too hard, so I'm just saying everything.
Right, so I'm a research software engineer at University College London. University College London has been like the first university in the UK and maybe in the world that has that title as research software engineer back in 2012. I arrived 10 years ago, and when I arrived we were 6 people, now we're more than 60, 70 people. And our role as a central team in the university is to help researchers to get better with the software. Now that has I think is a unique opportunity, and that's why I'm kind of trying to lead that the creation of the OSPO in UCL, is that we have contact with all the university and we write software and we know about open source already, so we are releasing software and helping people. But with the OSPO, what I'm looking for as well is to get more into the whole ecosystem of the whole university, not only the research, but the systems, the IT systems, and the students. Now, you also mentioned my background before becoming an RC. I was creating this software library for solar physics because that was my background. My background is astrophysics, and we created kind of an organization called Open Astronomy that helps to connect different astronomy projects in the open source community. But that's completely voluntary work. Even though I will wish that in my time at work, I was trying to work on that. But yeah, it's good.
So, is everyone here familiar with the term RSE? Actually, don't raise your hand because that'll make one person embarrassed. David, can you explain what RSE is?
So a research software engineer is a person who, we are as a team, a person who works with research software. Now, the question is, what is research software? Research software might be anything. It could be a script that a researcher writes somewhere. It might be a whole library. So as a research software engineer in a university context, is ideally, or the ideal RSE would be a person or a team that can keep a knowledge of this piece of software and that can help them to be better. And that's why the idea, at least in our university, was like a permanent job. Even like a postdoc, but as a permanent job. And you can work in multiple projects helping them to go forward. Is that enough explanation, or?
No, that's good enough. Angela or Aedín, follow-ups.
Yeah, so I would ask, when you are an RSE, are you hired as an RSE, or are you hired as, you introduce yourself as an astrophysicist? So are you hired as a discipline specialist, or for your computational skills, or that you have the combination? How do hospitals think about that?
So that changes depending on different teams. In our case in UCL is pretty much everything. So we have a central team, and that central team is kind of a generalist. We are contracted by our technical skills, but also by our personal skills, because we have to talk with researchers, we have to explain them what we do, and we have also domain-specific skills. Now, as a central team, we work in everything, generalist, but we also have smaller teams in other departments, normally like 1 or 2 people, and not many yet, but they're like at least 3 or 4 small teams that are around there, which are more specialized on that particular domain. So, yes to everything.
Angela or Aedín, can you tell me how your institutions help support RSEs? Why not? What does that mean?
Within the Irish context, there isn't a career title called RSE. It does not exist. The career framework, at least in Ireland, is pretty limited in that, you have students who have postdocs and they then have this Irish Universities Association salary scale associated with those, and those salaries are rarely those that would actually for postdocs, and that those are postdocs across all fields. So whether you work in social sciences and wet lab in a bench, or whether you're a software engineer, it's the same scale. So, one of the things that we've been asking for is greater recognition of, first of all, research professionals beyond postdocs, that you have core facility staff, and those core facility staff actually need a proper career framework. There's a project in UCC, it's an EU project called CDERA, which is actually trying to do that. They're saying, right, we need to actually have like research managers, core facilities, we need a career framework here for research staff. The other thing so what we end up doing then is we end up creating a title software engineer, but it doesn't really have a career framework, and it isn't actually structured within the Irish setting.
Yeah.
I will say, like, my other sort of hat that I didn't explain is I'm head of Node of Elixir Ireland. Sure, you may not know what that is. So Elixir is one of the European ESFRIs, and the ESFRIs are these research infrastructure organizations that are intergovernmental agreements across European countries. And so the ministries of the governments of the countries fund this kind of coordination across research infrastructures, and Elixir is for life science data infrastructure. And recognizing the importance of software for bioinformatics, for genomics, the types of work thing we do. They've recently done a research software quality kit, which is supposed to support research software engineers. So there's a whole load of work that's going on in this, but it's not there yet.
So I'll say in my context, we also don't have a title called research software engineer. We have research associates that happen to, by and large, be discipline specialists with a computational kicker in their background. So some kind of degree or computational training or a computational biologist or something like that. So their degree or their discipline specific first, and then their computational second, primarily. They are funded, soft-funded by grants, and they are put into grants as co-PIs or as contracts within the grants. That's primarily how they are funded at our university. So it's soft funding that comes in to fund them. We do not necessarily have a center that would be like affiliated with an OSPO. If you're looking for an example like that, there is one at Caltech, and it's funded by the Schmidt Foundation. And they actually have like an RSE center with that title, career pathing and all that kind of stuff. It's a good example of what a professionalized RSE office would look like. That's an example. That's not how we're running, but
isn't that also soft money though?
Well, I'd say soft money in that you have a foundation that is funding specifically RSEs. At UT, we don't necessarily fund specifically RSEs. We fund like big research projects that would include an RSE. Great, Josh.
Okay.
Please.
Just to offer a couple of other examples that I'm familiar with. Princeton University has a really robust RSE group that operates fundamentally on a sort of chargeback model. So it's not necessarily soft money funded up front. They're basically a core facility that you get money back. Boston University runs something similar there, and other others.
Got it.
And just the only thing to say is the way those have come about is often a kind of like bootstrapping approach where they get one person in place, that person, or one person or a couple people, they then start to demonstrate value. Essentially, they create more demand than they can serve, and they're like fractionally allocated, bought out by faculty. Then they basically, I mean, the Princeton group, I forget how many. It's like maybe there are 20 people now. It's like it's gotten very big because they've really like educated the faculty on the value of having a professional software engineer who you can use like 1 quarter for 2 years on your project.
That's how UT used to fund RSEs within the colleges. And then we had a big consulting firm come in and tell us that was a waste of resources.
That's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
How do you find that your OSPO can help or not help with making sure that RSEs have longer grant cycles?
I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, yeah. That must mean it's a good question.
I mean, the opposite side, right? So we created the RSE first, and now we're trying to create the OSPO. And yeah, I'm agreeing with what I was saying. Like first we started like what we're doing the research is like, oh, you got a grant for 5 years for a postdoc. Get the postdoc for 4 years, give us the other year, and we'll help you over 4 years at 25%. And that will help the postdoc, will help the software, will help the team, and then we'll get better. And that's how we started originally. But now essentially pretty much all the funders are asking for a RSE on the grant. So we are part of the grant, luckily, and that we get the money out for us and the 5 years for the postdoc. So no one else loses.
So a role an OSPO could play in that is to have the advocacy points for why an RSE would be useful on a grant versus like just having researchers do all the computing themselves. So we could advocate for something like that for sure. Also ensuring that the research software practices are open versus, some proprietary thing. So there are areas that we could definitely, the advocacy. I interrupted you.
No, I was just thinking, has there been a study done at either UT or UCL demonstrating the value of having an RSE, versus a scientist writing code where we know that the algorithm works, but it may not be optimized. Once you actually deploy that on your big supercomputer and your AI data center, and particularly if it's on GPUs, it costs there if you've got crappy software. And so there's potentially a massive cost saving if you then are actually funding the electricity for that data center. And, so has somebody actually done that study to say, the benefit of actually having an RSC to actually save money on the compute?
I believe that Dan probably has published something on that. I cannot put my title exactly on what they published, but
Daniel Katz.
yeah, Daniel.
One of the founders of the movement.
What I can say is projects like Archer, which is the supercomputer, national supercomputer, when they put grants out there, they ask as well, how an RSC will help you, how to either to make the software faster or to convert it into different architectures like GPUs or something. So they're making the calls, and if you have an RSC, probably will be more likely to be accepted.
I don't know if there are studies. I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to, and I've been up at TAC a hot, not even a minute, but I do know that they, as a normal practice, just of their normal NSF, NIH, DoD, DOE work, they have test beds for code. So one, if you're a researcher and you come and you want to use TAC, you have access to a research software engineer who can look at your code, who can run your code in a test bed to make sure that it works. And I do know that one of the things that my colleague, Jen Schrapp, is looking at is, how efficient are your data movements and how efficient is your network use. So we're actually paying attention to these things before we put them through the big compute cycle.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing even if there isn't a paper, that's because they've learned hard lessons about, what's inefficient and efficient inside the big machines. So
I have a couple more questions before I move it on to the floor. I think we totally should move on the floor. Is this a point in response?
Yeah, this is tangentially about that.
If it's tangentially, that's different.
Well, it's about the speed
Okay,
up
great.
stuff. So if you're in this room and you don't and you haven't run into this before, your speed ups from a 4GL like Python or R to a lower level language like C are going to be on the order of 10 to 100 folds in terms of speed up. And so if that's a cost that you can eat, then you stay in your 4GL. If they aren't, pay an RSE to fix it. Yeah, and I know it matters a lot what you're doing, but that's generic, right?
It does matter. And one of my immediate questions is I'm thinking back to when I was an undergrad and my thesis was going under, and I asked my friend who was a PhD in computer science to look at my code, and he just started laughing to himself. We're still friends. But he was only an academic as well, and I imagine an industry person would have been laughing at him in a circle of health situation. Do you find that RSEs are actually coming from industry, or are they just people who came out of academia who then say, I know how to optimize something, I'm really good at it, but are kind of messing it up?
So in our team, from the 60 plus people, I think that come from academia are 5. Or even less than 5.
Coming from academia. So
Sorry, from industry.
Everyone else from academia.
From academia, yeah.
Okay.
I suppose that the salary cut is meaningful to the people from industry, but pretty much everyone from academia.
So when we think about these studies that may or may not have been done, they're actually kind of important because otherwise we're just going off hearsay for how effective RSEs are at improving your cluster or your grant costs. Cool. Everyone's nodding. That's very sad.
Well, no, I'll say with a caveat that I'm not there could be a whole body of research out there, and I'm just unfamiliar with it. But I would certainly commit to looking into it.
I have one more fun question, and I get to ask it because I'm here. I'm noticing we have 4 different countries represented here. So I am a PhD student in Wellington, New Zealand, a member of NZAU RSE, you're a member of UK RSE, you're a member of US RSE, I assume, and there's maybe an Irish one, I don't know. How does the OSPO interact with the regional representations for RSEs, and does it at all?
Well, I'm trying, but still, my OSPO is not. The OSPO we're trying to push is pretty much very local yet, but I've been giving the announcement and the people information about what an OSPO is in the RSE conference for the last 2-3 years, and yeah, it's kind of information. And when you see other universities say, oh, we want that, then that is saying, okay, so then there's something good in there. So
I don't know if we told you, we had someone approach us who said, UCL has an OSPO, we need to have an OSPO. So it does seem to work, so good job. Good. Angela, Aedín?
Out of order.
Okay. I think that there's a thing here, which is that just because software is open doesn't mean it's good quality. And so, you know, for an OSPO, where if it's just focusing, let's have open data, let's have open software, there's a risk there, because I just wrote down the thing. There was a study that was done by Samuel and Mitchell in 2024, and they looked at over almost 3,500 publications associated with 27,000 notebooks, Python notebooks, in a couple of thousand repos. Of those, they were only able to properly rerun 1,200, and only 879 reproduced what they were supposed to do. So those were all on GitHub. So just because it's open doesn't mean it runs, it doesn't mean it's reproducible, and it doesn't mean it's high quality. So my question to you then is this something that should then be a value of the OSPO, that it's basically, and that maybe is that something that is a selling point, you know, like if we have high quality open software, we can see what's wrong with it, and then basically we can save you money on your data center or something like that as well, you know?
I think that coming from a research software engineering first, that's what we appreciate more, like saying we want to create an OSPO not just for the sake of everything is open, but to help them to open it, to help them to make it more maintainable, sustainable, and help like to create community. Because many researchers is like, oh, I don't want to put it on GitHub because I will get a lot of questions. I'm like, well, no, you don't. Or other people think the opposite. I would want to put it on GitHub because I want the community to take it away. I'm like, well, you don't. Like, you will need to make some effort to get the community around that, and that's what that's kind of my main goal around OSPOs in research, is to help them to create better software.
We definitely care about openness. That is, I mean, we're an open source program office, but our training is very much about just how to be a good software developer in a research context. That's 90% of our training.
Thank you all so much. I want to open up to the floor. We have like 15 minutes to ask really fun questions. I know some of you have them. I'm hoping, actually. Excellent.
Maybe a short question, but I'm interested in your centralized team. Are you sitting like under a department? Or are you your own entity, or how does that work?
So when I started, we were part of the IT services. So inside of the IT services, there were the people who were maintaining the HPC computing, were the people with all the data. They were not data stewards by then, but they were like research data space, and then we were us. But as we were growing and growing and growing, we were getting more, and our ambitions were even larger each time. We now have become our own independent department. So we are a department. We are, for something, we are tied to IT. For other things, we are tied to computer science. So, for example, for everything about teaching, we don't have still the capacity to run our own programs. And so we have our first PhD program starting last September. We still depend on computer science to do all this paperwork on teaching. But we are independent, so now we can write grants as well if we want to. We don't need to, which is the best of the rules. And we are considered as well as academics, as well as a professional services, kind of a mix. Now, this is not the common in the whole UK. Still, I believe that all of them are under IT services, or sometimes under computer science. Anyway, that was quite political. So that was a decision before I arrived, where they were like, okay, the usual house of that will be either computer science or physics. But then they decided, no, let's put it in IT services, even though everyone hated IT services, was to have it more neutral across the whole university. And then, yeah, that went well, and we grew, and now we are independent.
I think what you'll find, having spent a lot of time in the CIO office, is that there are ebbs and flows when it comes to the centrality or the distributed nature of an office. So my guess, maybe it'll be different for you, but when I originally started in the CIO's office and I wasn't even employed there, we had research software engineers for that function in the colleges embedded. The consultant came in and said, you could save money if you centralize that in central services. The CIO was like, okay, let's do that. And so they did that, and then people stopped using services because everybody hates central IT. So then you see the functions start growing again in the colleges because it's not at the center. So I think you have to look at your environment and really think what can survive an ebb and a flow. And it might be a mixture of both because I think it really depends on your environment. For all of the HPC, they're housed at TAC. And then they go out to the unit. But that's a very political question.
I think probably you need to avoid the pet bioinformatician kind of syndrome, don't you? That was a term that was coined for people who were like doing bioinformatics, but you were the pet because you were the person in the lab who did all of the coding. Oh, yes. So you were associated with the research group, but you were the pet that sorted all the problems. But the problem with that happened then was, that person is very isolated from their own community. Yeah. So I know what we did in the Barber where they had master statisticians. They were in one group together. They actually all got the same training. There was regular training programs, but then people would go out to work with the labs and spend time in the labs, but then come back. So it was exactly what you were saying. I think there's a happy flow between those.
You have your maintainers group.
Yes.
That's a great model for
sure. So I'm Francesca. I'm the technical community manager of the OSPO at Stanford. And so I think similar to many universities, RSC is not a job title, but we do have a lot of people who are functionally RSCs and even will introduce themselves as an RSC, just not on their actual job card. And when I was thinking about the earlier question about what an OSPO can do, firstly, we are in many ways working with US RSC. Before I answer that, we convene a maintainers and contributors roundtable, which just by happy accident has now become the convening group of RSCs at Stanford, and was done because our OSPO wanted to address this issue of creating community for software engineers, and they had no function to find each other because it was a title that simply didn't exist. And it just so happened that one of the people who is a very active participant is on the steering committee of US RSC and has on multiple occasions talked about US RSC to our now RSC group and had many people join. And since then, a working group, a Bay Area working group has cropped up, and sort of so a number of members of our roundtable hosted like the local get together, and I believe the US RSC conference happening in 2026 is also local to the Bay Area. So if anything, our OSPO did just kind of amplify the events of US RSC, but because we had that concentrated group, it ended up being fairly effective among our community.
Thank you. Colin, you had a question a while ago. You still have that question?
Yeah, I was going to say a comment question along slightly different track. So. And
go ahead.
Stephanie has one too.
Yeah, that's why I was calling him, because he was there first. So
are you the moderator?
I am a technical. That's fine. And I mess up.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry.
Call F and E. Wait, no. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess comment / question about funding for RSCs. So my impression, this is US focused, so apologies to people. Looking at funding opportunities from like the federal government and stuff, it seems like it's always either focused on either like building a community type thing, like poses, or funding new ideas, like or doing cyber infrastructure, which is very much hardware focused. But there doesn't ever seem to be or any programs to support like hiring RSEs to support research softwares in particular. Research software usually has a very niche user base, so like these other suggestions about expanding your community and user base doesn't really apply to research software. Am I wrong in that impression? Are there funding opportunities out there that I'm unaware of? And if I'm not wrong, is there something that we can do as a community, as an OSPO community, as Curious, to advocate for those type of funding opportunities?
So I suppose from Bioconductor, because that's completely research software, it has been funded in the US by U24 for over 20 years. And that's under the ITCR. No, it's under NHGRI?
Yeah.
NHGRI. It also has funding from ITCR in the US, and we had some funding from DoD, I think, as well. I think getting the brand of that was actually really, really important, and how, like, the thing that worked for Bioconductor was that it was a repository it ran an SBN prior to GitHub existing. So it was founded on the idea of versioning code, and it was a repository that you could submit your R code to, and it runs daily checks. And to this day, every package is checked daily to make sure that basically they run. Secondly, every package is required to have documentation and a tutorial and vignette. Third, every package isn't accepted until it's actually gone through a manual check. And fourth, there's data classes that are common, that are the basically standard data classes that we know we're going to operate on. And the idea is you write codes and methods that actually use those classes, and then you actually extend those classes. So you actually have an ecosystem that works together. And because of that, it has actually consistently been funded because it's recognized as quality. And when I talk to people in industry or people in data centers, or particularly the folks in pharma where regulatory decisions are really important, they will go, well, actually, we know the code in Bioconductor is good, it's checked. So it has that kind of quality sign on it. And as a result, that extra work is kind of like a little badge of honor, and if somebody gets their packages accepted, it is a publication. It was literally, oh, we got accepted. Oh, you're going to be able to get a publication out of that, because that's actually additional work you have to do to go through those checks. So sometimes having like that little bit of accreditation, so research software engineer accredited software, or having a badge is maybe a good way to go around it than having recognition for that.
The only foundation that I know that funds RSEs is the Schmidt Foundation, and the only reason I know that is because one of our researchers said we should go after that funding. But that is how looking at the Schmidt Foundation was how I found USRSE in general, because I hadn't been aware of it before that. But are y'all members of USRSE?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I was saying like something like lobbying NSF to create a program or something like that to fund, because like the example that you just gave is kind of emblematic of what I mean. So that was a successful thing, but it was specific to biology, and I'm thinking of like a program more where anybody can apply and get funding more for the structure, not for a particular subject matter.
Really quickly, I'm not moving to K Street, and like technically Curious doesn't lobby.
I feel like you'd fit in so well.
You've got the voice for it.
That's the most offensive thing I've ever heard.
You might have to wear shoes though.
All right, I'm not wearing shoes. Curious doesn't lobby on behalf of anything. We'd be happy to help support you lobbying or collaborations to do that. At the moment, we're really trying to hold back from saying this is a Curious stamped effort. because we know that that can be troublesome for some universities. So just really quickly, just felt the need to say that. I support the idea, and I'm happy to talk about it further. I don't want to move to Arlington either.
In UK, we have the Social Sustainability Institute, which has run last year, the first kind of a research software funding, maintainability funding, which it was very, like, they got loaded of proposals, and it shows the need, and the focus is more in maintainability, right? So it was not like, oh, let's add a new feature. They were like, we don't want you to put a proposal with a new feature. We want you to add something that will help the future of the project. And in Europe, there's also the Oscars as well, which is more about research software as well, some grants. And they're all new, like in the last couple of years.
You can also sneak in some of the Horizon grants as well.
So you're saying this back to your...
And as a US person, you can apply for EU funding. And within,
as long as you collaborate with an EU university.
Yeah, you can collaborate with us.
Really quickly, Josh has a point, and then you have a point.
I would just say that, I mean, from what I've seen, it's going to be quite rare to get just like direct funding for RSE positions. And I don't actually think that's wrong, personally, because in the same way as you actually very rarely, occasionally you'll get funding for an instrument or for other sort of capacity, usually in a startup vein or to get the thing in place. But ongoing maintenance or other things would generally be seen as part of a chargeback mechanism. And I do think that there's Ithaca SNR wrote a report on this about research software engineering as sort of core facility. That to me, the question you're asking, to me, the interesting question is how do you within a university context get the resources to cross that startup chasm to get a group in place? I do believe very strongly that once you get research software engineering, data science, and a handful of capacity, once you get people in place, that flywheel can get going. But it's a question of how do you get started. It's, external funding can be difficult to find. I don't know of any programs at the federal level that do that. We had thought about it at Sloan, but we just don't have the capacity to actually seed that at the scale that would be necessary. And Schmidt was promising at that point, but they also have a belief that they have a particular vision of RSEs being competitive with top industry salaries, and it's a different vision, I think, in some ways of what that position is that they're angling for. I haven't seen anybody else really who you can go to ask for that seed capital. It seems like more of you get the senior administration to buy in to the idea, and then they leverage whatever sort of either fundraising or sort of other resources that they have available to get sort of initial runway with the commitment that they need to be starting to cover their own salaries by a certain point. Another group that I've spent a lot of time with, because they were involved in earlier benchmarks, the University of Washington has an interesting model where functionally their RSE group is both sort of chargeback on grants as well as doing teaching. So different people are buying out their side in different ways.
So all of us are unsatisfied because we want this conversation to continue, but it can't. So we had to leave the audience wanting more. Thank you to our panelists. This was really great.